Hello crafters and welcome back to another Tutorial Thursday with me, Deepa from Designs by ID. So today we are creating a fun beach scene card using some seashells and some sparkle and a fun torn paper technique in order to create our beach waves. It's really simple and fun to do, so I hope that you'll try this one out. So here are the products that we're using today. I've got the seashells dies from the Crafty Canuck. I have linked something similar if you don't like these or you want to try something else. There's also the Best Wishes with shadow dye from the Crafty Canuck as well. These are the main products that we're going to be using on our card today, along with our fun torn paper technique. So starting off with the sentiment die, you can see that there's a shadow die and the main sentiment. I am just going to kind of twist this off so that they're separated. I'm taking off the little sticky double-sided tape from the back, and then I've gone ahead and I've cut it out of some silver glitter cardstock. Very pretty. The shadow I've cut out of some white cardstock, and this is how it looks. Now you can see that it kind of covers a lot, so I'm not sure if I'm gonna actually use that shadow dye portion or not, but I'll keep it aside and we'll decide later on. Now for the seashells, I do want to cut them and emboss them. So I'm going to cut them and then I'm going to use my embossing rubber mat and I'm going to put it through my die cutting machine a second time with my adapter plate there in order to emboss this. So different die cutting machines work differently. You are going to need a rubber mat in order to do the embossing, but you can see how beautiful the embossing looks when you do take the time to cut it and then do the emboss, which I know we always kind of forget that we can do this with our dies, and this technique is just really fun. Look at this seashell. It is just so embossed and pretty, and it just gives it just a much more textured and fun look. So moving on, I have these fine point blending brushes from Prism Studio. Those are also available in the Scrap and Stamp store. So everything that I've used today will be linked down below. So you can always check that out in the store if you wanted to grab one for yourself. So I'm using these fine brushes and they just make it so much easier to color in or add ink in detail on your die cut. So I'm using a bunch of Distress Oxide inks here. I figured it has more of that like milky, chalky tone to it. So I thought that would go well with the seashells. I'm using some saltwater taffy. I've got some dried marigold in here, some antique linen for the actual shell portion. You can see I'm just kind of using a mix of these colors on the shell, on the inside of the shell, and it's just going to kind of give you a nice mix of colors. It's not typically the color you might see on shells. I mean, you do see that. You might see a little bit more orange. It's completely up to you, the colors that you want to add onto your shells. You can do them traditional colors. You can just choose like any old colors you wanted. Maybe you got some blues and pinks. I don't know. It's completely up to you. I wanted to give this a little bit more of a realistic feel and to have those seashells kind of mimic what they might look like in nature. I figure these are a little bit more yellow than they would look in nature. They might be a little bit more white, but I did use like a beige cardstock to cut this out on, so that's probably why they have more of that yellow tone to it. However, I do feel that it contrasts better on top of the blue and emerald colored ocean that we're going to create, so that's kind of why I went with it. And keep in mind, our sentiment is like that silver glitter look. So again, there's a lot of contrasting so that things kind of stand out. So always keep that in mind when you're putting together your cards. If I pick blue on top of blue, it's going to blend in. So you kind of want something a little different, right? So I've gone ahead and I've added these inks to my shells. You can see I mentioned already I've dried marigold, antique linen, saltwater taffy, tattered rose, and then I think I've got frayed burlap down there at the bottom, like a nice brown. So I'm adding all of these colors, and then I did kind of finish these, and I was pretty happy with how they looked with the pink and the beiges. But then I thought, I want to add just a little bit of blue. So I grabbed my tumble glass and I'm just adding little accents, little highlights with the blue. And I find that by adding this blue from our background, which is going to be our ocean, it just kind of ties everything in and it just gives it a more flowing look, which I tend to do with a lot of my cards, even with flowers. any other different elements that I put on my card, I like to just have a hint of the color that I have in the background to make everything kind of flow. So let's move on to our torn paper technique. I've got 4 different colors of blue cardstock, and then I've also got this cardstock here. Now, this one is not linked in the description. You could just use some brown cardstock if you wanted. You could maybe use some like glitter or even some texture paste if you wanted to create the sand. That would work. I know there's also the grit paste that works well to create the sand. You might want to mix it with some brown ink and that would create the sandy look. I think that would work well. That was another idea I wanted to use for this card, but I decided to just use my sandy colored cardstock instead. So those are options for the sand. Now for the ocean, you can see I've got my 4 different colors of cardstock. I've got like a teal, a blue, and then like 2 more lighter blues after that to kind of move in from the outer ocean where it's like a deeper blue into a lighter blue as it meets the sand. And I'm just tearing these up like on the corners of the cardstock to just create like that shoreline. And it doesn't have to be perfect. You can see I'm just kind of tearing them and then kind of placing them on top of each other so that they create that gradient look. And now when you put it on your card base is where you can kind of position them better. So it's completely up to you. You could just do the side torn look like I've done. You could create like a wavy look if you wanted and maybe do this on a landscape. I think that would work a little better for the wavy look. But yeah, it's completely up to you. And that's the fun with this torn paper technique. Number 1, it's really quick. 2, you can use up your scraps. I didn't do that here, but if you have a lot of blue scraps, it's a great way to use up your scraps. And 3, it is so easy and fast and gives you a really great textured look in the end. So you can see here, I'm just kind of placing each of my different colors of ripped and torn cardstock, and I'm cutting off the edges. And I like to cut off the edges as I go because it gives me a better idea of how this is looking on the card panel, or you could do this directly onto the card base. It's completely up to you. I noticed that my last little teal piece there was a little bit small, so I went ahead and I just kind of ripped another piece. That's completely fine. Keep that teal piece. You can use it to die cut a smaller die in the future. I never waste my cardstock. I have lots of different folders, and I keep all of the different, like all the blues in one folder, all the yellows in one folder, and then I'll always go back and use those later on to use up my scraps. So I decided not to use that shadow background piece for the Best Wishes die because it covers up too much of that ocean. So I just went ahead and I cut out the Best Wishes die again, just from some white cardstock so I could create just a bit of a shadow behind the silver Best Wishes. And I'm just going to offset that die cut. So you could always use this technique if your shadow die is not, or is a bit too big and you feel like it covers up your background like I'm doing here. So I still get the shadow look. However, it's a lot tighter and closer to the letters so that I can see that beautiful beach shore in the background. So I'll go ahead and attach this with some liquid glue in an offset fashion so that white is kind of peeking behind the silver. It gives it a nice look. It makes it stand out a little more too. And now I'm going to attach this to my card base, which is a side folding A2 size card base, so 5.5 by 4.25. And I'm using these really small they're micro foam squares. They are amazing. So for smaller die cuts like this, these really come in handy. I'm just attaching these on the back. Now I'm not going to release or take off the release paper yet. I want to kind of position my seashells behind that sentiment and just kind of make sure my composition is good, kind of place them where I think that they would look the best. So I am putting a lot of the seashells up in the top. So I'm not having this on the seashore. If you had smaller seashells, you could maybe layer them up on the seashore and you could keep that entire ocean open so that you can see more of that torn technique. I have linked another sequin mix down below that has little seashells in it, which would work great for this. So you could always check that out if you wanted to try that. So yeah, now that I figured out where everything is going, I'll just glue everything down and make sure that, everything looks good before I attach my sentiment. And now that I feel like it's good, I've released all the release paper. I did that off screen because it is a little bit finicky. You probably need a tweezer, like a fine tip tweezer, to pull off all those release papers a little quicker than just using your fingers. And I've gone ahead and attached that. And now is what I like, or what I call the fun part, is adding all of the bling to this. And I think that really makes this card stand out. So you have the flashiness and the shininess and the glitter and the best wishes sentiment, but now we're adding some more along the shore. And the reason why I'm adding the gems like this on the shore is because I want it to kind of represent the little bubbles that kind of come up when the water comes to the sand and then it kind of recesses back into the sea. It just gives it a really nice look. It gives it a lot of fun shine, and I'm all about the bling. So this just is really a lot of fun for me. Now, I am using this mix. I have linked this down in the description below. I am using some silver sequin confettis as well, just in order to break up the clear gems a little bit. So it's completely up to you. You can mix and match different sequin packs. Totally, possibilities are endless. So I've gone ahead and added all of these little gems along the shore. I've added a few extra ones just you can see up there in the top left and right in order just to create some more movement in the card. And once we are done positioning all of these fun little pebbles and sequins and gems, that pretty much will finish up this card. And when you see this shine in the light, you can see just how pretty and gorgeous this is. If you want, I definitely recommend checking out the reel. It shows you all of that gorgeous shine, and like a shorter version of this tutorial. So that is the card for today. I hope that you've been inspired to create something close to this yourself. Everything's linked down in the description below, and don't forget to like and subscribe so you can join us for another tutorial Thursday next week. Have a great day, guys. Bye.